2 died and more than 80 people were injured after a crowd crush at Iraq's Basra International Stadium. Authorities are investigating the cause of the tragic incident. More details on this later in the news. Good evening. I'm CJ Hero. And I am Nina Rich Yelago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Now for the headlines. Economist spells out benefits of Philippines at World Economic Forum. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. asserts diplomacy as solution over West Philippine Sea dispute. Russian President Vladimir Putin claims Kyiv is neo-Nazi. China experiences domestic travel boom as COVID restrictions are lifted. And Marvel movies return to China after a nearly 4-year break. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. strongly believes a military clash is not the key in solving the dispute in the West Philippine Sea. He says militaristic solutions will end badly for everyone involved. Vin Pasqua has the details.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. says the government has no plans to strengthen its armed forces in response to the issue facing the country in the West Philippine Sea. Marcos says the small solution would only affect all the countries involved. That is what the president said in a dialogue at the World Economic Forum with its president Jorge Brende. Marcos says the Philippines is not yet in a position to match the economic levels of big countries like China and the United States when it comes to their arms and funds. Brende asked Marcos if it can match Japan's defense fund, which has intensified its country's armory by spending 2% of its gross domestic product over 5 years. Marcos believes the militaristic solution would end badly for all involved. He used the Ukraine war as an example. The Russian invasion affected not only neighboring countries but other countries, including the Philippines as well. Meanwhile, when it comes to security agreements with the United States, Marcos says Manila's relationship with Washington has progressed. Vin Pasqua reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
China and the Philippines continue to dispute over the South China Sea. Filipinos are concerned about the tension, including the chief executive. Madeline Villar Moratillo tells us more.
The president is concerned about the ongoing tensions in the South China Sea and insists that diplomacy should be translated. The president admitted that the country is always a bystander whenever there are tensions with big countries like China and the U.S. Marcos said the situation in the South China Sea is what he worries, adding that he can't even sleep thinking about the country's problem.
Keeps you up at night, keeps you up in the day, keeps you up most of the time.
China and the Philippines are at odds over the South China Sea, where Beijing claims most sovereignty of the area despite the Hague arbitral ruling that there is no legal basis for its claim. The military was ordered to strengthen its presence last month after a report that China had begun to reclaim some unoccupied land features around the island.
We have no conflicting claims with China. What we have is China making claims on our territory, and that is how we approach the problem.
Despite this, an agreement was reached between China and the Philippines to resolve maritime disputes when President Marcos Jr. visited Chinese President Xi Jinping. Madeline Villar Moratillo for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The Department of Trade and Industry, or DTI, addresses the problem of the continued increase in the price of commodities, especially agricultural products. The DTI presents a cheaper alternative. DTI Consumer Protection Group Assistant Secretary Ann Claire Cabochan says the discount caravan provides lower prices compared to the regular prices in other markets. The DTI is also participating in President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s Kadiwa program. Meanwhile, the DTI is grateful to farmers and manufacturers who, despite the continued increase in commodity prices, have not stopped producing and trading.
House Ways and Means Committee Chair and Albay 2nd District Representative Joey Salceda asks the Department of Information and Communication Technology, or DICT, to extend the SIM card registration deadline to June. The lawmaker says many Filipinos are reluctant and do not know the registration process. He adds the law and its implementing rules and regulations give the user 180 days to register the SIM, which can be extended for up to 120 days. Salceda suggests enforcing the extension and setting the deadline for June 27 of this year. Republic Act number 11934, or the SIM Registration Act, took effect on December 27. It requires all mobile subscribers to register their SIM cards. Registration provides accountability and aids law enforcement in tracking perpetrators of crimes committed through phones.
Thirty-three people have died from the massive rainfall and flooding in Visayas and Mindanao. These were caused by the combined shear line, low pressure area, and northern shear line. Based on the report of the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, or NDRRMC, 11 fatalities were in Zamboanga, 8 in northern Mindanao, 7 in eastern Visayas, 5 in Bicol, 1 in Davao, and 1 in Soc-Sargen. Meanwhile, 7 people were reported missing, while 12 were injured. More than 1.6 million people, or more than 412 families, were affected in Cagayan, Central Luzon, Calabarzon, Mimaropa, Bicol, Western Visayas, Central Visayas, Eastern Visayas, Zamboanga, Northern Mindanao, Davao, Soc-Sargen, Caraga, and Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. More than 199,000 people remain in 500 evacuation centers, while more than 1,600 homes were damaged. On the record, 1,100 were partially damaged, while 527 were totally damaged.
More people are benefiting from Pag-ibig Fund loans. Almost 118 billion pesos have been lent to Pag-ibig members for their home purchases. Kim Liana has the details.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has pledged to provide housing to more Filipinos. In line with this, the Pag-ibig Fund has released a record high of 118 billion worth of home loans, with 100,000 members having the opportunity to purchase a home. Last year's record is a 21% increase, or 20.57 billion pesos, higher than the 97.28 billion pesos issued by the agency in 2021. According to Pag-ibig Fund Chief Executive Officer Marilyn C. Acosta, back in 2022, a record high of 105,212 housing units were given funds by the agency to Pag-ibig members. This is 11% up from the previous 94,533 homes funded in 2021. In the mentioned housing projects in recent years, 18,657 or 18% of the socialized housing units are now owned or benefited by members of the Pag-ibig Fund, which are minimum wage earners and low-income sectors. The Pag-ibig Fund has vowed to strengthen its service to members who dream of having a home this year. Meanwhile, the National Housing Authority, or NHA, wants to surpass the 30,000 housing distribution last year. The NHA aims to distribute 100,000 housing units this year to eligible beneficiaries. Kim Liana, for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Coming up, a stadium stampede in Iraq leaves more than 80 people injured. New Zealand's Prime Minister is resigning and leaving politics. And China domestic travel is booming as COVID restrictions were lifted. All these and more stories when Mata ng Agila International returns.
It is a signal to the world that we are open for business.
Open for Business with Cesar Vallejos. Every Sunday, 9 p.m.
Susunod sa Counterpoint, ang bagong muka ng pagbabalita ng Net25 News. Kikilalanin.
If ever I'm gonna go back, gusto ko po yung something na talagang I will be proud to be a part of.
Kasama si Attorney Sal Panelo at multi-awarded broadcast journalist Ricky Matay.
Hindi ko palalagpasin ang pagkakataong ito, attorney. I want to ask you.
Sa Counterpoint, Miyerkules alas 10:30 ng gabi, dito sa Net25.
This is the first time I'm actually gonna reveal it.
Sa bagong taon, kita-kits na tayo sa Goodwill, ang bago nating hangout na super chill. Meet your newest opa, David Chua. Mag-click kaya sila ng super kabugerang si Devon Seron? Level up din ang kulitan at tawanan with the Goodwill Barkada. Laugh out loud at chill vibes lang with Smokey Manaloto, Kat Galang, Ryan Brems, James Caraan at Marina Penipayo. At syempre, di pa patalo sa akingan si Lodi Raymond Bagaching. Sa Goodwill, bawal ang mga hugotero at emotera. Ano pa man ang problema, siguradong Goodwill ang last resort mo. Kaya shout out na sa tropa at buong pamilya. Goodwill. Dito lang sa Net25.
Panalo tayo pag together, walang talo pag together. Let's stand together sa Net25.
Ayun na nga, sabi.
Bakit ka naman, Nay? Anong klaseng labang ginawa mo dyan sa mga damit ko? Bakit may mansa pa rin? Lalo, ba't mo nilagyan ng ink? Ink ba to? Ano to? Ay, baka pinalaban ng pumaso! You are fired! Huwag ka naman masyadong malupit.
Love, Bosleng, and Tali. Tuwing linggo, alas 6 ng gabi dito lang sa Net25.
Panalo tayo pag together, walang talo pag together. Let's stand together sa Net25.
Ano yung meron kayong mamaya see you? Ano yun?
Wala yun, Tito Toto. Ikaw napaka-usisero mo.
So parang date niyo po. Natatandaan mo ba yung bilihan ng damit doon sa malapit sa kaibigan natin? Pupunta kasi ako ngayon doon, mamimili ko ng isang katutak na damit.
Ang saya!
Gusto mo sumama?
Style! Style! Ha?
Dito, ang inyong sumbong siguradong may responding katapat. Hindi nagdadalawang isip na tumulong, sino man ang nangangailangan. Lubak-lubak na kalsada sa Nagcarlan, Laguna, pinarespondihan. Viral ngayon, isang ina na itinodokumento ang sitwasyon ng kanyang anak na may mental health problem ating tinutukan. At kapatid ng isang batang hirap makalakad, humingi ng saklolo sa responde.
Mahal ko sila eh. Kahit na anong gawin ko, kahit balbaligtarin ko yung mundo, kapatid ko pa rin sila. Katuwang na sila ng buhay ko.
Mapapanood nyo kami sa mga sumusunod na mga channels. Sabado, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi. Ito ang Responde, Mata ng Mamamayan.
The news continues here on Mata ng Agila International. The Philippines greatly benefits with President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s attendance at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. This is the observation of an economist who is closely monitoring the talks of world leaders. Nadine Aguilar has the details.
An economist is confident that the country will benefit from the presence of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and his delegation at the World Economic Forum, or WEF, in Davos, Switzerland. Michael Ricafort, chief economist at RCBC, says the WEF is the gathering of the richest, most powerful, and most influential countries, companies, and experts in many fields.
Nandiyan yung mga pwedeng mag-invest sa atin, yung mga foreign direct investments, foreign portfolio investments. Pwede din nating maging market sa exports. Yan, yung mga biggest companies, syempre mamumuhunan yung mga yan. Kung meron na sila dito, pwede pa nilang dagdagan.
He says the development of the Philippines' relations and connections with the WEF will help meet the needs of the country and the Filipinos, like infrastructure, food security, social services, healthcare, energy, climate change, and many others. At the WEF, President Marcos informed business and world leaders that the Philippine economy could grow by up to 7% by 2023.
In the Philippines, the picture is slightly different. And we project our economy to grow by around 7% in 2023. Our actual projection is 6.5, but there are signs that we might be able to surpass that. Our strong macroeconomic fundamentals, fiscal discipline, structural reforms, and liberalization of key sectors instituted over the years have enabled us to withstand the negative shocks caused by the pandemic and succeeding economic downturns and map a route towards a strong recovery.
Ricafort believes that it is possible and feasible for the Philippines to reach the said economic growth projection, especially since the country's economy is normal and open. Ricafort adds that one of the main economic growth drivers of the country is tourism. However, the economist admitted that there are still many challenges, such as the high inflation rate and the high prices of goods sold by Filipinos. The economist expects inflation to slow by the end of the year by 3 to 4%. He also agrees with Finance Secretary Benjamin Jokno's statement that the country has overcome the biggest economic challenges. The economist explains the increase in prices of goods was due to the impact of the war between Russia and Ukraine and the increase in the minimum wage of employees. Ricafort says that the increase in the prices of agricultural products are normal due to high demand and increase in the prices of crude oil and fertilizers. One of the solutions that experts see to ease and reduce food prices, especially the food, is to increase food production, which is gradually being addressed by the current administration. Nadine Aguilar, for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Under the Marcos administration, the Philippines is actively pursuing digitalization initiatives. This was one of the topics discussed at the World Economic Forum. Randy Bernardino for this report.
The Philippines is open to receive help from various countries to develop the government's digitalization efforts. This was one of the topics discussed in the open forum at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Department of Information and Communications Technology Undersecretary Ana May Lamantillo says the government is working together to make life easier for Filipinos.
Marami na po tayong kinausap. In fact, yung atin pong collaboration with a lot of countries, sinabi mo po kasing digitalization, it's really borderless. And the technology we need is not yet in the country. So it's really, we have to share resource, we have to share experiences, we have to share knowledge. In fact po, nakipagpulong po tayo. We've already signed memorandum of agreement Singapore and with China, and we're now working with Japan and the United States along with other ASEAN countries.
The ongoing development of the country's cybersecurity system was also highlighted at the forum. Lamantillo says it is essential to promote digitalization in bureaucracy. Its development is to ensure that the country is ready to face any threat to cyberspace.
Ang DICT po ay naghahanap bumuo ng isang national cybersecurity plan parang sa 2023 hanggang 2028 upang matiyak na ang bansa ay handang-handa na harapin ang lalong komplikadong mga banta sa cyberspace. Ang cybersecurity ay isang cross-cutting issue na naapektuhan tayong lahat. Kaya nga po, ang kailangan po dito is a whole-of-government approach, kung hindi po a whole-of-nation approach. Para po sa ating bagong cybersecurity plan, we're gearing towards a May 2023 deadline. And we will inform the public and kayo po, sir, as soon as this is made available.
Meanwhile, one of the most important things that the government is addressing now is the smuggling of various agricultural products. That is why the issue of digitalization is still being raised in the Bureau of Customs, or BOC. BOC spokesperson and Customs Operations Chief Arnaldo De La Torre Jr. says the agency supports the President's directive to promote digitalization.
Ang Bureau of Customs po ay welcome sa mungkahi sa obserbasyon ng ating Pangulo. At bagamat nakapagsimula na ho tayo ng digitalization programs ng Bureau of Customs, almost 92% na po tayong nakapag-digitalize. Ang pangangailangan at ang urgency na kailangan makapag-digitalize pa na kompleto at buo ang Bureau of Customs ay nandyan pa rin po. Necessary po na mag-digitalize ang Bureau of Customs at yung mungkahi ng ating Pangulo ay magandang simula para mas mapaigting ang kampanya ng Bureau of Customs sa laban sa smuggling at yung pong revenue collection ay dapat mas mag-generate po tayo.
Randy Bernardino from Atanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
In world news, 2 dead and more than 80 injured after a commotion took place before the final of the Arabian Gulf Cup. In the hope to watch the match between Iraq and Oman, thousands of supporters gathered outside the Palm Trunk Stadium in the city of Basra. A video posted on social media shows people pushing in the huge crowd. The crowd crush occurred after Basra's governor urged people without tickets not to flock to the stadium. A few hours before the ceremony, the governor said a flock in the stadium could lead to a crowd crush, which could tarnish the image of their country hosting the event. The Gulf Cup, held in Basra, is the first major football tournament to be hosted by Iraq in more than 40 years.
New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern is leaving politics. She says she will resign next month. Ardern said it's time for her to go, saying she doesn't have the energy to compete or complete another 4-year term. She became prime minister in a coalition government in 2017. 3 years later, she led her center-left Labour Party to victory in a national election. Since then, both her party and personal popularity have dropped. Her resignation takes effect on February 7. The Labour caucus will vote for a new leader on January 22nd. That will give Ardern's successor enough time to prepare for the next election, slated for October the 14th.
Israel's top court ruled Wednesday that a senior member of Premier Benjamin Netanyahu's newly formed government cannot serve as minister due to a recent tax evasion conviction. The Prime Minister's coalition slammed the decision. The group vowed to push ahead with controversial measures that would weaken the Supreme Court and its power to strike down legislation. Netanyahu returned to power as Prime Minister last month. He is the head of an extreme right coalition. His appointment of Aryeh Deri as Health and Interior Minister could not stand since it was extremely unreasonable, according to a summary of the court's decision. Deri admitted last year to tax evasion. He was fined 180,000 shekels or $50,000. He relinquished his parliamentary seat. The judges said Deri made it appear as if he had intended to resign from politics to get a lighter sentence. He ran for office again in the November polls. The court stated Deri's ministerial appointment was in serious contradiction with the fundamental principles of the rule of law. In Israel, there is no constitution. The Supreme Court currently has the authority to repeal laws or government decisions it considers discriminatory or unreasonable.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump is urging Facebook to reinstate his account 2 years after it was deactivated, as he gears up for a third bid for the White House. The social media giant banned Trump a day after the January 6, 2021 insurrection when a mob of his supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol. Trump's lawyer Scott Gast wrote a letter to Facebook parent company Meta. He stated that the ban had dramatically distorted and inhibited the public discourse. Gast asked for a meeting to discuss Trump's prompt reinstatement to the platform. He adds that Trump's status as the leading contender for the Republican nomination in 2024 justifies ending the ban. The former president had 34 million Facebook followers at the time of deactivation. Meanwhile, his Twitter account has 88 million followers. It was also blocked after the riot. The 76-year-old communicated through his own platform, Truth Social, where he has fewer than 5 million followers. Twitter CEO Elon Musk reinstated Trump's account last November. This was days after Trump announced another presidential run. He has yet to post on Twitter since his reinstatement.
Twitter appears to have removed the blue verification ticks that were purchased by the Taliban, according to a report by The Guardian. This comes days after a former Taliban official praised Elon Musk for making Twitter great again. At least 2 Taliban officials and 4 supporters in Afghanistan used the paid feature. One was the head of the Access to Information Department, Hedayatullah Hedayat, with 187,000 followers. The other was the head of Media Control Department, Abdul Haq Hamad, with 170,000 followers. This caused outrage among users. By Tuesday, the Taliban accounts no longer had blue check marks. It is unclear whether the social network or the owners themselves deleted them. According to Twitter's website, a blue check mark may mean 2 different things. First, the account has an active subscription to the Blue subscription service and has met eligibility criteria, or the account was previously verified under the legacy verification criteria. Individual subscribers will get the iconic blue verification check marks as symbols of authenticity. On Twitter's terms of service, the social media platform may remove the check mark of an account at any time without notice.
President Vladimir Putin insists Russia has every reason to consider Kyiv as neo-Nazi. The Russian leader says Ukraine glorifies Nazi collaborator Stepan Bandera. Putin explains Bandera used to shoot at dead civilians, but Kyiv made him a national hero.
How can you imagine this? No one seems to notice. Everyone is turning a blind eye to this, but this is the way it is. And they are persisting in this attitude. And they keep firing at civilians, and they keep glorifying Bandera. They continue humiliating civilians in Donbass and in adjacent territories. So we have every reason to refer to the current regime as a neo-Nazi regime, and we have every reason to help, including by military force, people who believe that they are native Russian speakers, that Russian culture is their culture, and who treasure this culture, we cannot fail to stand up.
A Washington Post analysis says ordinary Russians failed to feel the economic pressure from the West. The Post's Adam Taylor points out the shortage of Western imports had just a small impact on Russian industries. But he explains the overall growth might have been called a breakthrough at a different time. He also cites data from Russia's Ministry of Economic Development, which shows the gross domestic product, or GDP, in Moscow only declined by 2.1%. It completely beats experts' forecasts that Russia's GDP would decline by 10 to 20%. Taylor notes that although Russia is not invited to Davos summit, the country is not completely cut off from the world either. Moscow's current account balance also surged over the past year. Other news sources say the West and its allies will have a hard time hitting Russia's economy. Analysts say perhaps this is the reason why Ukraine is pushing their tired allies for more support in Davos.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky urges his Western allies to make quicker decisions to help his war-torn country. Zelensky's plea comes during his speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland.
Tragedies are outpacing life. The tyranny is outpacing the democracy. Russia needed less than 1 second to start the war. The world needed days to react with first sanctions. The time the free world uses to think is used by the terrorist state to kill.
Zelensky's call for speed is a veiled reference to Germany's hesitation about whether to supply Ukraine with heavy Leopard tanks.
A German news agency claims that Bulgaria was running a secret arms and fuel supply scheme for Ukraine last year. The cities of Sofia and Budapest have publicly opposed supplying Kyiv with weapons amid its conflict with Moscow. But the news outlet says former Bulgarian Prime Minister Kirill Petkov and ex-finance minister Asen Vasilev devised the scheme. It also says the two former officials supplied Ukraine with weapons, even though it was opposed by the public. Bulgaria polls show that 70% of its people feared being drawn into the conflict and opposed giving too much support to Ukraine. But sources say Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmitry Kuleba traveled to Sofia in April last year to ask for military aid. Petkov's government then permitted to export arms to some private companies that served as intermediaries in transporting the weapons via Poland to Ukraine. At the same time, Sofia made no official pledges to support Ukraine with arms to avoid any conflict. The German news agency further says the U.S. and the U.K. funded the covert deliveries, but it was Bulgaria that supplied fuel to the Ukrainian army.
Twitter head Elon Musk continues to lash out against the World Economic Forum, calling it an unelected world government. Elon made a remark in response to a lengthy Twitter thread by author Michael Schellenberger about the Davos Forum. He also posted a Twitter poll to gauge whether people think the WEF should control the world. A majority of Twitter users said no. Musk previously expressed skepticism about the WEF's push to reshape economies and societies in the name of addressing perceived planetary threats.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has harsh words for the world's major oil companies. Guterres says they should be held accountable for what he calls the big lie that energy companies have peddled about their role in global warming.
Fossil fuel producers and their enablers are still racing to expand production, knowing full well that this business model is inconsistent with human survival. Now, this insanity belongs in science fiction, yet we know the ecosystem meltdown is cold, hard, scientific fact.
In the battle against the tuberculosis epidemic, plans are underway to create an accelerator council. This group will facilitate licensing for the use of new vaccines against TB. Rosel Feria tells us more.
The World Health Organization says the tuberculosis epidemic shows no sign of slowing down. In 2021 alone, WHO says approximately 10.6 million people fell sick with TB and 1.6 million died. This despite countries committing to end the disease by 2030 as part of the Sustainable Development Goals. In response, the health organization says it will establish a new tuberculosis vaccine accelerator council. The announcement comes at a high-level panel on TB at the World Economic Forum. WHO says drug resistance continues to be a major problem. Close to 500,000 people develop drug-resistant TB every year. The council is to facilitate the licensing and use of effective novel TB vaccines. Currently, BCG is the only licensed TB vaccine. It provides moderate efficacy that prevents severe forms of TB in infants and young children. However, WHO says BCG falls short in protecting adolescents and adults who account for close to 90% of TB transmissions globally. A recent study reveals a vaccine with at least 50% efficacy among adolescents and adults could avert up to 76 million new TB cases, 8.5 million deaths, 42 million courses of antibiotic treatment, and $6.5 billion in costs faced by TB-affected households. WHO says a vaccine that is 75% effective has the potential to prevent up to 110 million new TB cases and 12.3 million deaths. Later this year, there will be a second United Nations high-level meeting on TB to correct setbacks in the TB response. Rosel Feria, Washington, D.C., Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
China is witnessing a domestic travel boom after the government dismantled its strict zero-COVID strategy last month. Chinese tourists strolled through bar streets in the country's backpacker haven of Dali, partying the stress of the past 3 years into oblivion. Similar scenes unfolded in Yunnan province and the upper half of Mekong. Just 2 months ago, traveling involved navigating a maze of onerous restrictions and multiple testing requirements. But now, shuttered PCR testing booths dot the sidewalks of major cities like relics of a bygone era. Some are covered in a crust of disinfectant residue, and others are broken into by street cats.
Up next, patriotic millionaires urge world leaders to adopt wealth tax. 1/3 of U.S. Congress members receive contributions from FTX. And frigid temperatures in Afghanistan killed 70 people. Please stay tuned as Mata ng Agila International will be back after this short break. London wants to revitalize a dilapidated railway into a park in the sky. In the UK, Ryan Florentino tells us more.
London is on track to transform a disused stretch of elevated railway in the heart of the city into a park in the sky, emulating similar successful schemes in Paris and New York. A non-profit group in London's Camden Borough is hoping to have planning permission approved for a High Line park, which would transform a currently abandoned railway siding. Camden High Line is using the same designers as its New York namesake, and like the Manhattan Walkway, also takes inspiration from the promenade plantee René Dumont in Paris.
The New York High Line people have been amazing, actually. They've been so helpful, so supportive, and that's been a great starting point. We ended up appointing the same designers who did the New York High Line, although they're working with local architects here in Kentish Town. So I think the link has been very, very strong. I think they're going to be quite different beasts, not least because we're right next to a real train. We're hoping to build an amazing park in the sky. As you can sort of see behind me, the other side of that wall there, there's going to be this walkway between King's Cross and Camden Town. There's going to be a pleasant, beautiful environment in which to move between these very vibrant parts of London.
While there's a lot of enthusiasm, not all locals are fully won over. It's expensive and it's quite short, says one. The entire walkway will be built in phases and estimated to cost at least £35 million. Reporting from London, United Kingdom, I'm Ryan Florentino for Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Nurses in England walk off the job again to back demands for more pay and better working conditions. The two-day strike will result in disruption for patients. The country's healthcare system is trying to cope with increased demand because of winter illnesses. The two-day walkout is expected to result in 4,500 canceled surgeries and 25,000 canceled outpatient appointments. The system is further stressed by lengthening waiting lists caused by COVID cancellations and understaffing. The demand for more pay comes as the government announces inflation is still above 10%. Nurses say they have to work extra shifts to make ends meet. Further strikes are planned for early next month. European Parliament member Giorgos Kyrtsos has accused Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis of undermining the rule of law in Greece. Kyrtsos shared his letter to European Parliament President Roberta Metsola on Twitter. He says that Mitsotakis acknowledged that the wiretapping of the leader of the opposition PASOK party was inappropriate. He says Mitsotakis also tried to distance himself from the surveillance scandal, even though he had direct responsibility. Kyrtsos claims the Prime Minister used pro-government media to convince Greek citizens that wiretappings are part of European public life to cover up the scandal. Sources say Kyrtsos is also a victim of a wiretapping scandal that has been shaking Greece for months.
A wealthy man from the United Kingdom is among a group of millionaires in Davos pushing governments to increase taxes on the rich. Phil White is a member of a group that calls itself Patriotic Millionaires. They are at the World Economic Forum to urge an end to what they call extreme wealth. He says he is alarmed by the fact that the rich got richer during the pandemic as the cost of living has skyrocketed. White says government action should or could set things right.
We believe in annual wealth taxes, and that's because extreme wealth actually generates a number of problems. There's an economic issue with the wealthy taking money out of society and keeping it when that money could be used for other things. But also there are social issues in there and democratic issues associated with extreme wealth and divisions in society. And the only way around that really is to reduce wealth over time and to reduce extreme wealth.
More than 1/3 of politicians in the United States Congress accepted contributions from Sam Bankman-Fried and other former executives of FTX. 196 of the newly sworn-in lawmakers were funded by the fraud-riddled crypto firm. Critics questioned the legality of the funds and if they need to be returned. Members of both political parties received contributions, including top officials. Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy, a Republican from California, and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, a Democrat from New York, are among the highest-profile recipients. So far, only 53 of the 196 have decided what to do with the donations. 64% have forwarded the money to nonprofit charities, and others have set aside the money to return to FTX victims.
The owner of a China-based cryptocurrency exchange was arrested in the U.S. on Wednesday, along with 5 associates in Europe, during an international operation against darknet markets. Anatoly Legkodimov, the owner of Bitslato, appeared in handcuffs and leg shackles in a courtroom in Miami, Florida. He is charged with money laundering and was denied bail by a judge who deemed him a flight risk. The 40-year-old Russian was detained for his role in allegedly transmitting a total of $700 million in illicit funds. The U.S. Department of Justice says criminals used Bitslato as a haven for narcotics trading and selling stolen financial information. 5 other men, mainly of Russian and Ukrainian nationalities, were arrested in Spain, Portugal, and Cyprus. French authorities say it was part of a complex police swoop. U.S. court documents reveal Legkodimov is the founder and majority shareholder of Hong Kong-registered Bitslato. Bitslato's largest partner for transactions was Hydra, an anonymous illicit online marketplace on the dark net. Hydra was shut down by U.S. and German authorities last year. The secret darknet includes websites that can be accessed only with specific software or authorizations, ensuring anonymity for users. As the arrests were announced, authorities dismantled Bitslato's digital infrastructure, including its servers in France, and seized cryptocurrency worth $17 million. For more than a week now, Afghanistan has been in a deep freeze. Sub-zero temperatures have left at least 70 people dead. In Kabul, people are lining up to collect bags of coal that will provide them with some relief from the cold. Kabul and several other provinces have endured temperatures that dipped as low as minus 33 degrees Celsius on the weekend. In the countryside, homeless people huddle around campfires. The more fortunate in the snowy capital have the luxury of domestic coal heaters. The cold weather is also taking a toll on the livestock industry. An estimated 70,000 head of cattle have perished in the cold over the last 8 days. Cattle are a vital commodity in the poorer regions of the country. The winter weather has also made it tough to get around. Heavy snow has blocked roads in several central and northern provinces.
Coming right up, Elon Musk auctions off Twitter headquarters bird statue for $100,000. Tech giants Amazon and Microsoft will enforce massive layoffs. And Marvel movies return to China after almost a 4-year break. Catch more news when Mata ng Agila International returns.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang angking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
A Twitter bird statue fetched $100,000. Elon Musk has been auctioning off furniture, decorations, kitchen equipment, and more from the tech firm's downtown San Francisco headquarters. Heritage Global Partners Auction Service says an online auction of Twitter's corporate office assets lasted more than 24 hours. The auction featured a 10-foot neon light in the shape of Twitter's bird logo. It was bought with a winning bid of $40,000. Other auctioned items included espresso machines, ergonomically correct desks, televisions, bicycle-powered charging stations, pizza ovens, and a decorative planter shaped like an @ sign. The Twitter boss says he has been cutting costs like crazy after buying the platform for $44 billion. Weeks after Musk's takeover, 7,500 workers have been laid off. The company is understaffed in performing content moderation. Since the new ownership, there's been a surge in racist or hateful tweets, sparking scrutiny from regulators. Twitter is also losing big advertisers, which serve as Twitter's main source of revenue.
Amazon begins a fresh round of job layoffs affecting more than 18,000 employees. Meanwhile, Microsoft says it will lay off 10,000 employees in the coming months. These are the latest announcements in the tech sector's wave of firings. The job cuts follow a major hiring spree during the height of the coronavirus pandemic. In 2020 and 2021, companies scrambled to meet demand as people went online for work, shopping, and entertainment. At the start of 2023, Amazon CEO Andy Jassy said the company would lay off 18,000 employees, mostly in its stores and human resources department. Other announcements from the company said they would also trim staff in its devices and recruiting divisions. Meanwhile, Microsoft has announced a third round of layoffs. The latest job cuts will affect slightly less than 5% of its total employees. The tech giant says the cuts are in response to macroeconomic conditions and changing customer priorities. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella says companies everywhere were exercising caution as some parts of the world are in a recession and other parts are anticipating one. Chinese film fans celebrated on Wednesday the return of Marvel movies to the country's cinemas after an absence of nearly 4 years. Foreign films are tightly controlled in China, which imposes an annual release quota. Movies in the hugely popular Marvel franchises have been off the silver screen since the release of Spider-Man: Far From Home in July 2019. Disney-owned Marvel Studios on Wednesday said on Weibo that Black Panther: Wakanda Forever will be released in Chinese cinemas on February 7, followed by Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania on February 17. The China Film Administration, affiliated with the Communist Party's propaganda department, has not explained why Marvel movies were blocked. Nonetheless, Chinese fans welcomed the announcement. Disney's comeback to Chinese cinemas restarts its earnings in one of the world's biggest movie markets.
The Guinness World Record says a Spanish great-grandmother has likely become the world's oldest living person at the age of 115. Senior consultant for gerontology Robert D. Young says Maria Brañas Morera is believed to have assumed the title following the death of Lucille Randon, who was 118. Guinness World Records must still make the official decision after carrying out document checks and interviewing Brañas Morera's family. Morera lived through the 1918 flu, 2 world wars, and the Spanish Civil War. Her youngest daughter is 78-year-old Rosa Moret, who attributes her mother's longevity to genetics. Moret also tells regional Catalan television that her mother has never gone to the hospital, she has never broken any bones, and she is fine and has no pain. Meanwhile, the world's oldest known person, French Lucille Randon, has died at the age of 118. Randon was born in southern France on February 11, 1904, a decade away following World War I. Spokesman David Tavella says Randon died in her sleep at her nursing home in Toulon. Back in April 2022, Guinness World Records officially acknowledged her status as the world's oldest known person. The things she witnessed and experienced.
I know.
Amazing.
How to be her. To help you go through this week, here's a quote from Duke Ellington, an American jazz pianist. A problem is a chance for you to do your best.
You need to be tested.
I know, and it almost makes me glad there are problems.
Just not too much of them, please.
Please.
And that's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates on our social media channels. I am CJ Hero.
And I am Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.